Thank you all for being here with us today. We are here in the ecosystem panel where we are going to discuss the technology ecosystems. I'm Claudio Garcia. I'm president of the Outthinker Strategy Network, and I have the pleasure to be here with Chris Huff, the Chief Strategy Officer of Kofax, Tushar Amin, the leader, business model innovation leader of Kyndryl, a recent spin-off from IBM, and Patricia Miron, that is the General Manager of small and medium tier segment at Microsoft. So I will start this panel quickly. I mean, we are seeing like a revolution the last 20 years. What is to be a company? You know, so one good example of that is we see that today the six out of 7 most valuable companies in the world are playing through ecosystems, meaning technology. So it's a big change. How is that affecting the whole competition within organizations in different segments, in different contexts? So I will start here with Patricia. Patricia is in one of these companies, one of these large companies, you know, that is somehow in one of these ecosystems. So Patricia, I would like to hear you. What is changing now, and which are the new rules that we are seeing happening in the market right now?
So thank you, Claudio. Microsoft has a very large book of business, right? You can think about our gaming business. You can think about our ad and search business. You can think about our 3 cloud business in the commercial space. And in all cases, ecosystem plays a key role. And one of the challenges is that it's an ecosystem that we compete for. Depending on the market, we're competing with our competition to gain the hearts and minds of that ecosystem. And, I think that is a big change, because the barrier to change, or the barrier to embrace multiple competitors as a partner, is relatively easy, right? And so for us, we've really had to spend a lot of time thinking about how can we be more empathetic to our partner's business and what is best for their business in order for us to be a differentiated partner. Because we know that they're never going to be exclusively our partner, and the ecosystem is never exclusively our ecosystem. So how can we be the best partner and the best supporter of their business needs within that ecosystem? And I think that's the big mind shift that's happened, at least at Microsoft.
That's interesting. It's good to hear from your perspective, but we have like other companies that are not as sizable as Microsoft. Let's say Chris at Kofax. How is that for you? In the other side, being a good company, but not as big as Microsoft, playing this whole ecosystem context right now.
Yeah. So this gets really interesting, because you're right. Microsoft, 1.7, to 2 trillion based on the day that you look, market cap, and we're a 3 to 5 billion market cap company, private though. And so what's interesting is we work together. Microsoft and Kofax work together in a very competition type relationship. So I'll get back to that, but I think your first point on a macro level, I see enterprise software industry and success within ecosystems really coming down to a few factors. And one, and Patricia started to touch on this, is like, how do you differentiate yourself from your competition? So what do you do better than the others? And that is becoming more and more difficult to tell that story than it ever has before, which then leads you to have to pull on the ecosystem. But the second one is really like how well you really create your product market fit. All the way from the right product features to the right delivery model to how you price and how you take it to market. So the right channels, all of that is a balancing act that I think now is more challenging than ever. And then the last one, which is what I think Microsoft does a great job with and gets to the competition relationship that we have with Microsoft, is what do you do to keep your customers happy? And in a subscription world, which is the dominant business model now, as opposed to perpetual buying something outright, in a subscription world, you've got to keep your customers happy. Are they going to switch from your subscription to another? So renewals are everything. When it comes to competition, Microsoft offers workflow automation type solutions. Kofax offers that as well. But when we got together with Microsoft and said, hey, like, what are we really looking to drive in terms of value? Microsoft and Kofax aligned on very similar principles. And that is, one, we wanted to keep our customers happy because happy customers are then sticky. And so that was the very first sort of value proposition that we drew out. The second one was platform consumption. And Microsoft was very focused on Azure consumption. And we were very focused on our automation platform consumption. And so when we took our automation platform along with the Azure cloud platform, that made good sense because we had certain depth that maybe Microsoft didn't have. And that's what ended up making the customers happy. And so the competition relationship really gets down to how do you make the customers happy? And that value proposition, 9 times out of 10, will win out.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'll get Tushar right here because Tushar has a specific challenge right now. He is in this new role of business model innovation leader at Kyndryl that is just like out of IBM, right? So there's a big challenge here. I mean, there's this continuous like product market fit process, and that affects business model. How are you seeing this whole context through your challenge right now, Tushar?
Yeah, well, I think for Kyndryl, which, as you said, is a recent spin out of IBM, but it's kind of an at scale startup. It's $19 billion in revenue, or in the IT services market. And really the whole premise behind the spinoff was so that this business can more effectively partner with the platform players, the large companies, including Microsoft, right? And also Amazon and Google. How can we effectively partner better with the companies that are reshaping the entire IT industry, right? And out of the gate, we've gone right into this mode of developing partnerships, where as a captive unit of IBM, we really couldn't do that well. Now we can do that well. So we open up our entire market. And then, the ecosystems that we join as a result of partnering with these platform players open up a whole new set of capabilities that we've built and we have to do in terms of partnering. So, it goes a little bit to what Chris was talking about knowing what your core is and knowing how you're going to partner with players in those ecosystems to develop your end-to-end value proposition to deliver to your customer. And, how that contrasts to the ways of the past, just even 5 years ago, we thought about it more in terms of company to company competition. But now it's ecosystem to ecosystem competition. So the ecosystems that you pick to play in, the partnerships that you develop in those ecosystems, which the benefit of the ecosystem is you can quickly compose and decompose the right partnerships as the target value you're trying to develop and deliver to your customer changes. You can do that with the ecosystem very rapidly. And I think all of those things require a new set of capabilities. And, we've been focused on building those capabilities so that we can be A, more effective partners with the platform players, but B, that we can be, participants in the ecosystem. And, the unique thing about being a participant in the ecosystem is, the ecosystem is not effective unless all players get value out of it. So I think, the capabilities building that you have to have in the partnering arena is really a big piece of it. And for us, it's the fundamental proposition for us to become a separate company, to go pursue these partnerships, which eventually, if you look down the line, what it does for us is it opens up our market. And if in the classic sense of competition, if the markets you're in, the value generation model in your industry for those markets, and then you can effectively create a business model to compete. Those things all still hold true, but I think when you apply it to the ecosystem, like we're doing in terms of participating with Microsoft in their ecosystem, they really take on a different set of capabilities around partnering that you need, and it really gets different than it was in the past.
Yeah, you comment something that I want to explore first with you and Chris. I will start with Chris. That is how to pick the ecosystem to participate. And I will come back at the end to Patricia because she is kind of an orchestrator. She's in one of the orchestrators of a big ecosystem. I want to hear her opinion. So Chris, how do you pick the ecosystem? How do you select where to play? That's a big decision today for many organizations.
Yeah, I think it's a huge decision, and Tushar started to talk on like the ecosystem, and you've got to give just as much as you get out of the ecosystem. And so my challenge, as a smaller compared to Patricia's and Tushar's business, is to how do I play with the big guys, but also keep myself at the center of my ecosystem. So what's the unique value differentiator that I bring to the ecosystem that keeps the Microsofts, that keeps the Amazons and the Googles leaning into our relationship? And that's a challenge on a daily basis because of this accelerated rate of change. So I think the way that I sort of, decide which ecosystems to align with is that we typically start with the problem that we're trying to solve for. And from that, we start to craft a very clear value creation statement, which is to say, like, now we have an approach that allows us to start with the end in mind, or the why, and then we back into who, what, where, how, like all of the go to market and what it is you need to do with your product to create that value that's needed to win. But I mean, if we think about it, like in an era of increasing sort of data, I have my teams when we're considering new ecosystem alliances to create a very quantifiable business case to justify any recommendations and decisions that we make, because when we make one, we go all in. And if you just do surface level press releases, that's not an ecosystem that you're going to get any value from, and you're going to end up spinning your tires there. But I would say, throughout my career, I've noticed a couple things as it relates to sort of picking an ecosystem and winning. And first is that the companies that we've had the most success with, and therefore realize success on our end, is that I work with leaders that are good at reading tea leaves. So they're able to see the future, they're able to translate that future into company action, and they have the willingness to take decisive action. So they appropriately weigh risk reward, they understand opportunity cost, and they move faster than their peers. And those are the relationships that we essentially win with. And I would say the second thing is that for ecosystems to work, the relationships of the people in those ecosystems need to be just as strong as the technology and product market fit, which is to say having mutually exclusive and sponsorship at the executive level from your company and the company that you're doing business with. I think that's absolutely critical. Because execution level activities, relationships, they all take the cue from the executive sponsorship. So if that is absent from the alliance within any ecosystem that you're a part of, then the market relationship is likely to be nothing more than vaporware.
Tushar, what's your take on this?
Yeah, no, I think Chris's last point is absolutely right. When we determined, hey, we need to have a different type of partnering capability, we created a very senior organization in the company to go after this and create those capabilities. And the capabilities are very different that you need inside of an ecosystem. Let me give an example. Startup technologies. For example, Microsoft's ecosystem has a bunch of startup players, right, in them, and it's a way for those players to really get traction and scale and exposure. When we engage with the ecosystem around the startup players, we had to develop a capability to actually industrialize and help in a commercial way many of these startups. Whereas, as part of a unit in IBM, our startup engagement may have been more slanted towards the M&A side of things. Here, it's slanted much more towards commercial and commercial enablement. A lot of these small startups don't have commercial abilities to engage with enterprise IT organizations, ability to put themselves in the larger value proposition of the customer, right? So, our ability to actually partner and engage with them had to be driven at a very senior level. So that's one thing. And, the second thing I'll go back to, though, in terms of picking the ecosystem, I don't think we really pick the ecosystem. I think at least in the way that we've done it as we've come out of IBM is, we had a clear understanding of the market, we had a clear understanding of the core value that we deliver, and we picked the platforms that we're going to partner with. And by picking the platforms we're going to partner with, we naturally joined their ecosystem. But another thing, a funny thing about joining those ecosystems is if you don't have everything you need in the ecosystem to deliver the value you want to your customer, so your ultimate value proposition to your customer, then you take on a role in the ecosystem of actually expanding that ecosystem, right? It's incumbent on you as a participant of the ecosystem to expand it with the partnerships that you might bring along, et cetera. So I think, and that all goes back to, again, the partnering capability. I don't want to over stress that, but it is a very important point. So I don't think we really picked the ecosystems. We picked the platforms and we joined the ecosystems. And then B, it takes a much different capability to be able to operate in those ecosystems with all the players to the left and the right of you.
Yeah. So coming to Patricia right now, that is, I mean, I can tell a little bit about, help you a little bit, but I see Microsoft as they always depend and focus on partner with the client. That's my perception, because they need the client like thriving and, I mean, getting more license, and they grow together, something like this. But now we have like big players as well, like playing with you. So they are not only clients or companies. It's different. I would like to hear you in this position of being one of the top orchestrators of a big ecosystem that you are.
Yeah, and I love your choice of words of orchestrator, because I think that's really what our role is orchestrator. And so, I mean, we have a organization that's dedicated to to focusing on partners and all of our different business. I'm going to focus in on the commercial cloud business just because I think it's really relevant to this conversation. And so, first of all, we spend a lot of time thinking about what are the different groups of ecosystem players that we need to engage with. And we look at it at a lot of different layers, right? So we look at it in terms of categories of business, right? There are, we think about what we call ISVs, which are partners who are writing unique IP, right? That they're distributing that happens to be leveraging our platforms or connected to our platforms. We think about customers that help deploy and drive consumption, right? So we have different categories of partners that are, in different groups of ecosystems that we're trying to get to connect together and engage with. The second thing is we spend a lot of time really trying to understand all of those players, and we do it at sort of two altitudes. There's a global altitude, and then there is a sort of geographical and even in some cases regional altitude. We obviously, there are players that are working at a worldwide level, and we engage with them at a worldwide level and have conversations with them about, what is their product, what is the unique IP, and really trying to understand. Then there's regional players where we're trying, like in addition to understanding what's their unique value proposition, we're also trying to understand where do they play? Like, are they exclusively focused in Brazil, or are they exclusively focused in Israel? Or, even in the US, are they, is their predominant sales team in the West Coast? Because we have players that are like that have such a deep, specialized level of expertise that they're worthwhile for us to engage with. So we spend a lot of time really trying to understand that and then distribute that across a sales organization that is extraordinarily large. There are more than 7,000 sellers in the US organization alone, and trying to get all of those sellers to understand who are their core ecosystem players and what exactly is their unique value proposition. And to Chris's point, knowing that unique value proposition is changing real time all the time, is a never-ending process for us in terms of communications. And sometimes our sellers know better than we do, right? Like we learn it from our sellers, and then we have to think about how we're going to distribute it back across the team. So there's that layer of it. And then the next piece of it is us trying to communicate what we're trying to accomplish, because our strategy is changing and evolving all the time. Like we are trying, I think a great example is what we've just announced around security, and that we're going to, we're going to allow our securities features to support actually some of our competitors' cloud solutions, right? And so, helping our partners understand not only what we're doing, but what that means for them and how that evolves, how they position our products. That's also, a tremendous amount of work and trying to do it at scale all the time and forever evolving. And then the last piece is because we're not talking about a transactional business where there's a starting point and an end point, but we're now talking about a service that never has an end. And to Chris's point about trying to create stickiness, we also have to spend a lot of time thinking about how do we basically take the sand out of the gears from us to the partner, to the customer, and all the way back all the time, and trying to make that process as fluid as possible. You think about licensing, like just closing out the licensing agreement, but then you think about, service problems, a data center problem, like those things are all real and they happen and they're part of this business. And so how do you allow for fluid communications and transparency so that just that operational process is smooth and transparent all the time? We spend a lot of focus on that. So, we look at it kind of those three different perspectives with multiple layers. It's a very challenging orchestration process. Absolutely.
Really interesting. So it's interesting that all of you brought a lot of like new competencies, new behaviors that you expect from teams or from the corporations in general. So you mentioned here partnership capabilities. We are commenting here about orchestration as well, like product market fit. So I would like to go to this question. Which are the fundamental change that happen in an organization that is playing more in an ecosystem-based environment than in a traditional competition environment? So I will start with Chris again, and we go to Tushar and Patricia.
Yeah, so I think the whole ecosystem business model, and I would view it as a business model and not just, sort of a fad, because I don't think it's a fad. I think, if you look at some of the most recent analyst reports from McKinsey that sizes they call it the integrated network economy, but it represents a global revenue pool of about $60 trillion is what they size it at by 25. It's right around the corner. Essentially what that does is that increases the total economy share from just 2% today, ecosystems 2% today, to 30% in just 3 years. And so this is a massive macro trend that's, if you use it appropriately, becomes a tailwind to your business. So if you effectively and strategically use ecosystem to create enterprise value, that seems to be the companies that are winning out. But I know I use, at least two macro trends to strongly influence how I sort of set vision and design strategy for our ecosystem business model. And the first is that I find myself taking a first principles approach to solving these really complex and ever evolving, as Patricia said, ever evolving situations with the ecosystem players and the demands of our customers. And so first principles, as we all know, is just breaking down complex concepts into fundamental issues or root cause, which is simply by asking why, right? Like our little kids that were like, stop asking why. Well, that's what I encourage my leaders to do, is continue asking why, because you eventually get down to like why the organization exists. And at the end of the day, it's to create value for shareholders. I know the Business Roundtable recently updated that. I think it was 2019 to include, more inclusive stakeholders and not just shareholders. But at the end of the day, you're supposed to create value. But if you think about how value is created, which gets to like the ecosystem play and where we're focusing and doubling down on the ecosystem, there's terrific research that the S&P 500 has done that shows that the value in 1975 of the S&P 500, 83% of the S&P 500's value was derived through tangible assets. So companies that owned buildings, land, cash, inventory, that drove value. But if you fast forward to 2020, it's the inverse. 90% of the S&P 500's value now is through intangible assets, which is customer data, software being applied to customer data to create personalized products and services. That's where value is being created right now. So our ecosystem approach is to focus on intangible value creation. And that then leads you to the right ecosystem partners that you should be focused on. And so we're less focused on the brick and mortar oriented, ecosystem players. We're more focused on those digital transformation companies. And so that's how we sort of see that organizations are changing today, and how the management practices that I know that I'm deploying and that I see being deployed around me are being shaped. And it's through this sort of integrated network economy that we find ourselves in, that we are articulating in this discussion through an ecosystem business model.
No, that's good. Would love to hear you, Tushar. And one point is that I agree with you, Chris. I mean, when you see valuation and value of companies is moving quickly to intangible, but there is still a huge economy of tangible assets there that are being integrated to the ecosystems in general. And I think, Tushar, you're closer to them because you provide service to a lot of these companies. Well, I want to hear more from your perspective on the capabilities that you need to build within an organization to compete in ecosystems, but also how do you help your clients, your partners to come together with you?
Yeah. So look, I think there's two levels of that. First is kind of what I talked about earlier in terms of partnership capability. It's a very, I use the word partnership because I don't have a better word for it, but it's a very different set of capabilities you need to be able to, do the things like Patricia said, act as an orchestrator, right? But there's that. Then there's a very large piece, especially for my company, because of we're about 90,000 people strong, we're IT services. It's the investment in the skills and talent in that ecosystem. Because if you're going to be an effective player in the ecosystem, you need a different way to think about your investments in human capital. And I'll take an example of what we're doing with our partnership with Microsoft and participation in their ecosystem. Our CEO recently talked about how, we've put into place new sorts of training and upskilling models. And we're going from about 1,000 certifications on Microsoft to tens of thousands. So it's a very different type of investment vehicle you need. Some of it's your investment. Some of it is the investment of your partners. But ultimately, you need to create the skills, not only for the platform you're partnering with, but for the technologies in that ecosystem, right? So that in a services company, that's how you become an effective value-added service provider for your customer. So I think there's that capability. There's a partnership. There's the human capital, skills, and talent investment that's needed. There's a piece that's needed around go-to-market, how you engage with an ecosystem-based solution or partnership is different than how you engage as an integrator, right? So, do you go to market lined up, or do you go to market, together, right? Those types of things. Those are all the capabilities that you need to have as a company. But I'll go back. The second piece of it is outside of just that, what I'll call functional capabilities that need to transform. There's this notion that Chris brought up about new business models, and I think there was I may be citing this slightly incorrectly, but I think it was a McKinsey study that said, hey, look, 5 years from now, most companies expect 50% of their revenues to come from new business models. And, if you think about that, how do you compose these new business models? And this is near and dear to my heart as business model innovation leader for Kyndryl. But, it is going to be more ecosystem oriented than ever before. And, the capability to compose new business models, which I'm working on right now for the company, is very critical, because you got to be able to compose them not only within an ecosystem, but across ecosystems. You need to be able to create constellations of capability that you can draw upon from your strengths, and your strengths arguably being participating in some of the key ecosystems that are driving the market. You need to be able to take those strengths and construct new business models at the end of the day. And that's a capability that I think a lot of companies are starting to, or have in place, or are running with, because I think, it's high up on the CEO agenda to create new businesses, new revenue streams, and things like that. So I think those are kind of the two areas. One really focused on, the capabilities that need to transform, And then the second is the actual capability to create new business models. And how do you leverage your current ecosystems, and how do you think of almost these constellations or ecosystems of ecosystems to create your new business models?
No, thank you, Tushar. That's really interesting. And Patricia, Microsoft, I mean, the last 5 years passed through a major transformation. New president. I mean, I would like to hear you as well. I mean, how this transformation was in the direction of being more effective through partnerships, through ecosystems. I want to get a little bit of like the experience you had so far in this transformation, in this direction of the ecosystems, of course.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're correct. We've been through a major transformation, and a big piece of that was really how we worked with our ecosystem, right? And to Tushar's point, I mean, we think about the people in the ecosystems that we choose to invest in, and how do we help them, right? Like, we are literally thinking about, we're offering them ways to get skilled up and understand, and constantly be skilled on our products, right? So that it can help them either deploy or build out new solutions. To Tushar's point, I mean, we make a significant investment in that space. We even think about, how do we help our ecosystems find the talent that they need, right? In the past, we were always worried about our ability to find talent. Now we're worried about our talent and our ecosystem's talent, and the ability to find that, for everyone to be able to find that talent, because we need that to happen. It's something, particularly in our business application business. So Dynamics 365, it's a place that we are constantly looking at, how do we have more talent in the market? As an example, we think about, how do we enable our ecosystem players, in some cases, to build out their own IP, right? We are, we're really leaning in heavily with a lot of startups now. And, that is a really different sales model for us, because it is about them helping them build out their new model, their new business model, their new intellectual property, and how do we support them in doing it? And they are challenging us on our traditional sales model and what we bring to support them, not just in constructing the deal, but then deploying the deal. And so that's another big place where we've had we've really had to go back and think again about how we, support these companies that are both, they're first a customer, and then they become part of an ecosystem, right? So that's been a real evolution for us. And then the last thing I would say is, while we have dedicated sales teams for our biggest customers and our mid-tier market, we also have dedicated sales teams, but we have really evolved their thinking to encompass the ecosystem. Like, they know who are the sellers in their, in the key partners that they engage with in their research, and they know who those sellers are. They talk to them every day. We're trying to find ways to make that daily conversation that needs to happen when they're engaged in an opportunity as fluid as possible. And that was a big evolution, because in the past it was sort of like, well, Microsoft would create the opportunity, they get it so far, and then they would hand it off to the ecosystem. And that is no longer the case in terms of how we worked. So, it really comes down to, we changed our sales model, and we changed the mindset of how our sellers sell. We think about the people in our ecosystem and how they're skilling and whether they're able to find the right talent. And we've really learned that we have to work like almost engineering to engineering in many cases with our ecosystem to really get to a robust, differentiated product, especially when it comes to new business models. And we are learning how to do that as we speak.
Okay, no, great. So we are going to the end of the session right now. And my question is, we have many companies interested right now in understand better ecosystems, to join ecosystems and a bit more successful. So what would you recommend as a first step, as a foundational step for companies that are not playing, or at least like intentionally playing ecosystems yet? So that would be my question. So we start with Chris, Tushar, and Patricia. Yep.
Yeah, I would strongly recommend that anybody that's starting out and is staring down the barrel of this ecosystem business model, I think they do need to account for a few fundamental elements. The first is value creation. You must have board alignment on value creation, first and foremost. Doesn't matter what you do, if it doesn't align with the board's view on value creation, then it's going to be an uphill battle. So I think aligning with the board on value creation should be your true north. Second, I think, is culture. Your company culture needs to be promoted in a way that discourages operating on an island in favor of operating as part of an ecosystem. That is very important because, again, there's just been this tidal wave over the last 5 years of ecosystem business model, and that's new for a lot of senior CEOs. And so to get them completely on board with it may take some time because the CEO does set the tone from the top on culture. The third, I would say, so this is starting at 30,000 foot and coming down, is strategy. You have to have a clear ecosystem strategy. You can't just say the word ecosystem. So you have to have a plan to achieve ecosystem, I would call it connectedness, both in your product, what it is you take to market, and in your go-to-market, how you take your product to market. And it needs to be effectively communicated in a very simple manner across the organization, so that way other functions can see how they play and support the strategy. And the last thing that it always comes down to is execution. So have a strong strategic alliances, ecosystem leader, team, whatever you want to call it, but this group is going to be responsible for operationalizing the ecosystem strategy. It's accountability 101. And so I would say if you focus on value creation, culture, strategy, and execution, that should lay a good foundation.
Thank you, Chris. Tushar, what else in your opinion?
I think that was what Chris said was kind of spot on. I think it does start with having those having the strategic clarity defined in the front, knowing your markets, knowing what's your core, what are you going to do, what are you not going to do. That'll help figure out, what's your role in the ecosystem. Also, I think what might be important in going about doing that is understanding what platforms have convening power in your industry, right? And that'll help you understand, what ecosystems you'll join, right? And I think, when you have those two things figured out, then what Chris said is absolutely right. You have to have a capability internally to be able to go execute against that. And that goes from everything from having the right strategy to having a partnering capability, if that's the important thing. And also, making sure that it's at a senior enough level in the company where it's a top 3 priority, right? It's essentially going to drive your top line. It's essentially going to drive some form of value creation for your company. So it has to be high in the strategic agenda as well.
No, really good, really good. And as you talk about power, Patricia, power, how Microsoft use, its power, to bring like clients to ecosystems or make them ecosystem-based companies. As a suggestion, like for these companies that want to start like playing in ecosystems intentionally.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Microsoft has this power.
Okay.
I would say Microsoft has this responsibility, which I think is different, right?
Much better.
And to degree an accountability when we agree to partner with somebody. And so like if I think about if you're thinking about joining if you want to be part of an ecosystem and you're looking at a big player like Microsoft, what I would say is you really have to know what your differentiation is in the market and where you want to go. And I agree that, having board level, executive level commitment to that unique value proposition is really going to be critical, because when you come at a big, when you approach a big company like Microsoft, right, who has hundreds of thousands of partners, right? You really have to have clarity on who you are and what you want so that you can focus and manage the conversations and you engage with Microsoft around your differentiated value and making sure that Microsoft understands what you need, what you need from that big company and what you're looking for. And, think of it both in the context of what is the sort of product augmentation that you need, right? Or distribution augmentation, or like, what is that technical piece? What is the go-to-market piece? And then what is the sales model piece that you want? And know that, because you're coming into a big engine and they're going to, like Microsoft, we're going to want to structure you in the way that we know. And if you can't articulate what you need, then you're just going to get thrown into sort of this big engine and it'll be much harder to play. But if you have clarity and can articulate what you need in those three categories, you'll be far more successful. But I'll tell you, be patient, because it takes a while to get to that point, right? To Chris's point, the why, you're going to get a lot of whys when you talk to a big company like Microsoft or any other large ecosystem player. You're going to get a lot of whys, and you need to be able to be patient in answering those whys, but it's to your benefit in the end, so that you're not stuck somewhere and you're not being sort of generalized, but really being embraced for what you bring to the market that is entirely unique.
No, thank you, Patricia. No, I will. I love the conversation. I think a lot of good insights here. I think one of that stuck me the most was about how you need to be closer to your clients and how you need to follow the path together with them. What changed completely the way that a lot of companies that are more like traditional based think about organizations. That is like just sell a product or service and there's an end. And here you need to stick together for a long time. Of course, there's so many other changes here. So I want to thank you all for the participation of this panel today. I'm pretty sure that everybody enjoyed here. I enjoy a lot. So thank you all. And I hope the audience has enjoyed as well. I thank you for joining and see you in other panels.